Hi, Will Gethin here. Welcome to episode 4 of the Follow Your Blissters podcast. Today's guest is the audacious deep life explorer and stand-up philosopher, Tim Freke. A respected authority on world spirituality and author of 35 books, including Deep Awake and Soul Story, Tim has a contagious enthusiasm for exploring the mystery of life, embracing both hard-headed science and open-hearted spirituality. His mission is to help people become enlivened, connected, and in love with life. In this interview, we explore Tim's eclectic journey from his explorations of different spiritual traditions and psychedelics to his modern application of ancient contemplative practices and his new path of what he calls Unividualism, offering a visionary new understanding of the nature of reality and the purpose of life. Enjoy the journey. Okay, good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Will.
How are you today?
I'm good. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Really looking forward to it. There's lots of things I'm looking forward to exploring with you, and got lots of questions, and I'm really looking forward to it. Tim, I think we met back in about 2008. I think you were the first ever speaker I booked for the guest speaker program, which I set up at the Isbourne Holistic Centre in Cheltenham. You're the very first one.
Well, I'm honoured.
So I can't remember where I came across you or how I sourced you, but I clearly remember sort of putting these posters up around town, and it was what building was it in? Was it in the town hall? No.
I have no idea.
But I can sort of picture it as the first.
Me too,
the first
vaguely.
Event. You're the first one, and you came into lots of events there. We've since done quite a bit together over the years. I've written an article about you, about the mystery experience retreats, and about your sort of related to your last book, The Mystery Experience, not your last, but the one before last, a few years back, and you did the Spiritual Ecology Conference in Bristol, and
that's right,
talking about the future, and that was all great, and but I haven't seen you for a while, so it's really good to have you in the studio, and I think let's just dive in and talk about your experience of the hero's journey, Tim. Is there a specific experience of the hero's journey arc that you've had in your life? I mean, I'm sure you've had many, but that you'd like to talk about today, or?
Well, my sense of it is that the whole of my life has had that arc, and then the hero's journey, this kind of archetypal pattern, has played out over and over and over again, like wheels within one big wheel, if you like. And the most obvious example of the call, that initiatory moment where you're starting something specific. And I think it's really important, that sense of being called. I think that the most obvious place for me to start was an experience I had when I was about 12, not far from where we are in Glastonbury, in a little town where I grew up called Yeovil, overlooking the town as a boy. And for whatever reason, I was always very curious, or more than curious. I always had a profound sense of how mysterious it is to be alive, and that there must be meaning. My feeling was, look, that life is just so full on. It's like one big question. So there must be a big answer to go with the big question. And, I can remember walking with my father not far away from the hill in which I had this call, not that long before, probably a few years maybe when I was younger, and asking him this, and him going, "Timothy, better men than you and I have asked these questions and found no answers." And that was his response. And it was like, and what I remember, and I don't remember that many things from my youth, but that I remember this one conversation. It's kind of curious and interesting. And what I remember is feeling, I don't think I said it, but in my memory, which may be, of course, colored, but in my memory, I remember thinking, oh, but I will, because why else would I be alive? And so that was in me already. And then I sat on this hill sitting with all of those questions, like what the hell is going on, and what's suffering, and what's death, and why are all the adults pretending they know what's going on when they don't?
Well, it's quite interesting in a way your dad was right at one level, because I think you later came to a sort of realization within yourself that it was important to sort of drop the questions and live the mystery.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a constant dialectic. I mean, one of the places I've ended up is a kind of a both-and philosophy, which sees the truth often in opposites, and how they coexist. And in a way, that started from the first thing. So the thing was sitting on this hill in Yeovil and having my first, what I now call a deep awake experience. So just being transported in my sense of what it is to be alive, my experience of life, into a place where there's a profound unity and enormous love. That's the thing I remember from a kid, and I wrote about it, so I have some record of it.
Yeah.
And that was the call. And the call was what the thing that it opened up. This refers to what you were just saying, really. It opened up the idea that the understanding I was looking for was experiential. It wasn't a set of ideas.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I've obviously heard you talk about this experience before because it's such a important one in your life.
A seed. Yeah, it's just a seed.
Where something opened that sent you off on a lifelong quest to find answers and to spiritually awaken and then to take others in that direction too. But can you just describe, as it was such a profound and important moment, if only fleeting, what exactly happened? Here you are, a 12-year-old boy on top of a hill.
Well, I have to be careful because obviously I'm now 61, so it's a very long time ago. Like I said, I did write about it a bit, so I have got some record. My memory is primarily, oh my God, I'm just suddenly being like in a secret garden next door to where I'd been living, just slipping into this other place where the colours were bright and it was full of love. And a deep sense of this is what makes sense of life. Probably, I think, because I'd grown up in going to church on my own, actually. There was probably a sense of, oh, this is God, and God is love. This is why I'm feeling this love. And the call, the bit that's relevant to our conversation, was absolutely clear. I knew from that moment on that I had to know what that was, how to get back there, how to explore that other way of being. And like you said, because my nature has always been to create and communicate, right from the start, I immediately started communicating about it because that's what I'm like.
And I've heard you talk since about your belief that enlightenment really is a misconceived concept. But I'm guessing in those early years, this sort of youthful ideal, you probably sort of were like, "Wow, this is sort of connected to this idea of enlightenment, and I need to go off and become enlightened."
That took a while. Because, at 12, I didn't have any of those concepts. Right. 12, 13, I hadn't read any books, I didn't have any of that. So, that came later.
Yeah.
I mean, not, teenage years, just starting to read books on Buddhism or Hinduism or all those things, and then picking up the idea and thinking, okay, all right, so what I experienced. The basic thing which happened, I think, in the early years was me just looking for people who'd had this experience. And most of the ones I found were dead people who seemed to be talking about oneness and love. And I started realizing that it was all over the place. And reading Huxley's The Perennial Philosophy, I think, was key with that as well, because he'd gathered them all together for me. Right. And I could read it through and go, oh, look, here's a guy in Hinduism, here's a Taoist, what are those things? How are they different? What are they talking about? And what started then, and this is something which isn't in the hero's journey, I don't think, but maybe it is, because I looked at Campbell for a while, but it seems really important, which you do get in wonderful literary iterations, like Lord of the Rings, which is the brotherhood or the sisterhood or the group.
Yes.
And so immediately I started feeling this, I'm part of a community of mainly dead people who've been exploring this. These are my family. That was how I used to call them family. Right. And I'd come across some new, Meister Eckhart, he's family.
But they were also, I guess, your mentors, not in physical form. But,
absolutely. And I still have that to this day. I still have that. I discover new figures, and it feels like, they're part of this same community. And sometimes living as well. I had it with, Van Morrison did it for me when I was listening years later to his music, and then he himself writes about feeling that very sense of community in some of his songs with all of these artists and mystics which speak the same language.
Right. So having had that initial sort of taste of waking up, or whatever you want to call it, you sort of, you carried on with your school years. You probably didn't, I don't suppose did you realise at that point that was going to be a profound part of your life going forward, or did you sort of let it go for a few years and come back to it later? Or
that's such a great question, and honest to God, I don't know how to answer it. I think it was always there. It's just obviously there were other things too. You know, I was still a kid and I was still doing crazy things as a teenager. And I was just full on exploring what it is to be alive. I think that's what it initiated.
So when did it sort of come through again, that sort of stronger calling? Like, was it university or after leaving university?
Oh, no, way before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, way before. I mean, you know, it was, you know, constantly resurfacing and informing everything. I joined a Hindu cult, in effect, really, quite when I was 17.
Oh, really?
I ran away to a friary and almost became a friar a little bit before that.
Oh, really?
One of the most dramatic memories I have around that time of that sense of calling again was going to India with my father, who'd been there in the war and had always promised me he'd take me. Traveling around India together and then coming back, having been up to Nepal and bought I literally was dressed head to foot as a Tibetan with all of this Tibetan clothes, which including shoes, you know, everything was Tibetan.
And your dad was still in his t-shirt.
And he was still looking very much like a conservative councillor from Yeovil, although he was very eccentric, actually, my dad. So he was always dressed pretty eccentrically. But I came back and I'd met, actually, bizarrely in India, I'd met an occultist and been intrigued by it, and came back and I, you know, remember sitting on my bed, just having come back, all dressed up in this stuff, meditating and going, I need to meet a magician, because I need to know what the Western magical tradition is about, and literally receiving a call the next day.
Oh, really? From
my dearest friend going, I've just met this amazing guy. He's a Kabbalist. And that's starting a whole nother level of the journey. So that would have been 18. Right. So it was constantly happening. And and I think that's why I say it's circles, because the call would come again. So the minute I had that phone call, that was a call. Yeah. That was like, okay, now this will dominate my life now. And it did for a whole period.
Well, sometimes the call comes again and again, doesn't it? There's a kind of refusal, and the call keeps coming and coming until you finally properly take it up.
And that's one version of it, you know, Will, but there's also a version of it where if you say yes, you just get more of it.
Yeah, more
calls keep coming on the back of it. It isn't just if you say no that it goes, no, you must pay attention. Yeah. You know, that's one version. I mean, I don't think I ever said no. I think I always said yes. And then the adventure would move on. And then you'd play that chapter. Yes. And that chapter would have the same basic pattern of what made it a chapter is that there would be a call to something. You'd follow it through. You'd get lost. It would break you down. It would build you back up. You'd become wiser. You'd realize, you know, you'd gain what you gain from it. And then the next call would come, and that would be the beginning of the next chapter. That's very much how my story is played out. Right.
And when do you think you sort of got a clear line on becoming a sort of writer / spiritual teacher? Did that come later, or was that always sort of in the mix?
I remember on the spiritual teacher thing, I remember going to see Ram Dass. At that time, I was still with my guru. A little bit older. So it was kind of like bad because I'd gone to another spiritual teacher when I should only be with my guru. But I loved Ram Dass, and he was so funny and he was so human, and there was something about him. I just thought, and the incredible feeling watching him was, that is what I must do.
This was in the States?
No, this was in Bristol.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he came to Bristol. There was 1,000 people, and
he did a talk or a workshop.
He did a talk, and it was 3 hours long. He didn't stop. We all sung at the end. There was 1,000 of us. The love in the room was amazing, and he was charming and funny and everything that he had. And I fell in love with him, and this massive sense of this is it. Another call. Yeah. But there you go. I said I don't think I ever said no to the call. Well, I did say no to that call, and rightfully. So that's kind of different again, isn't it? It's complex.
What was that call?
The call, well, the feeling was, this is what I must do. And of course, that is turned out what I do. Yeah.
To teach like Ram Dass.
Yeah. And since then I've sat down at dinner with Ram Dass in Maui and, you know, all sorts of, and come to know him before he died. But at the time, I just thought, because I was living very much within the tradition I now reject, that there's something in me called my ego, which is out to sabotage my spiritual journey. Yeah. So for me, that was ego. I was like, oh my God, how arrogant of me to imagine that this is everything that's wrong with me. So I spent a huge amount of time trying to crush it and get rid of it. And of course, actually at the time I wasn't ready. So it wasn't a bad thing.
Forget those terribly egotistical thoughts.
What a terrible thing to think that I could possibly be up there doing this. When it actually happened,
get back in your box.
I was I was just worried it would lead to inflation.
Yeah,
and I saw a lot of inflation in spirituality.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Actually, when it did happen, much later, the opposite. It didn't inflate me. It did the opposite.
Yeah,
it was probably I'm probably at my best or most humble.
Yeah,
when I'm given the chance to share the truth.
Yeah,
it's the rest of the time I'm such it's a troublesome person.
But meanwhile, so at age 18 or 20 or 21, did you have a kind of sense of a career that you would follow other than being that?
Yeah. Because I didn't think I could possibly be that or and although I'd been a writer, I wrote straight away. Once I came down from the hill, I wrote my first play.
Oh, did you?
And
on that theme?
It was on the theme of love through history.
Right.
And it was quite a big deal. The television cameras came down.
Wow.
And we packed out, and I produced it with kids.
Wow.
So I wrote it and produced it with a group of kids, and we did it together. And so it was, it was a big deal in the town at the time, and that was quite important stepping stone for me. So looking back, I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
But the biggest game in town was music. And
of course you're a musician.
Yeah. So music was having a huge effect on me, and music was the order of the day. And so I felt like, if you really want to affect consciousness, the way to do that is through music. And not just consciousness, but society. If you want to change things, if you want to make things better, then this is the route to go. So I really focused on music.
Interesting, because I know he's a friend of yours as well. So maybe that sort of similarity isn't lost between the two of you. But Thomas Moore, who I interviewed for this podcast a few weeks ago, he also wanted to be a musician first, didn't he? And he even said that right now he's still not even sure that wasn't the right thing. But
yes, people say, I'd often sometimes, I say I'm not a successful writer. I'm a failed musician, really. But there's something so pure and beautiful about music. But, what I love about writing is that ideas last. If someone takes, if I take an idea from somebody, it can transform me for life. Music tends to be incredibly powerful while you're listening to it.
Yeah.
It's a different medium.
Yeah. So let's sort of back on the sort of journey, as it were. So you're, in a sense, on this, as we discussed, there's these continual sort of circular journeys that are happening every even week or even day. But in this sort of broader arc, you sort of took off to explore, altered states of consciousness. I think you tried ayahuasca and various drugs, and you studied an enormous amount of different traditions, which you obviously wrote about in your book. So I guess each one you sort of dive into Sufism here and Hinduism here and paganism here, and we discussed a bit about mentors, haven't we? But were there any mentors on the road that were particularly significant?
Yeah, well, Ram Dass was, but the one who was more personal and closer to me was when I ran away to this friary, and I'd had a big row with my dad. This is quite young.
Yeah.
And just literally ran out, and was picked up by the police on the road. God. And they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to this friary," because I knew they took in tramps. Yeah. And ended up at this friary. And it was run by a gentleman called Brother Bernard, a Franciscan friary. And he became a mentor and then eventually a friend. And I kind of ran away there again in my 20s and nearly stayed that time. But he remained a friend right up until his death. So he was a mentor. And what he did was he balanced out this influence of the East, because very influenced by the East and by the Enlightenment traditions and by the idea that the self was something in the way. And he always returned me to the value of the personal. And looking back, at the time, if I'm honest, I was an arrogant young man. I thought he didn't get it. Yeah. When I look back now, I realize I didn't get it.
Right.
And he put seeds in me that bore fruit just in the last 10 or 20 years, for which I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah. Wow. And, out of all this sort of world you explored, all different spiritual traditions and different ideas and philosophies, where were the sort of powerful keys for you? Was there a particular tradition that really sort of spoke to you or taught you the most important things?
No. I think it's been different things at different times. So, in terms of my life, the one that's had the biggest impact was Christian Gnosticism, because that's what we wrote the bestseller on with my dear friend Peter Gandhi, who, by the way, just as a little twist of the story, was in the play I wrote when I was 13.
Oh, was he?
He was an actor in it.
Right.
And all those years later we did, so that became an international bestseller. So that was hugely significant because at that point,
what was that one called again?
It's called The Jesus Mysteries.
Yeah.
And what that did was, I mean, suddenly we were being driven around limousines in the States and, all that. And it meant that suddenly I could write on a different level. Suddenly I used that as a platform to go, now I write what I want to write in the way I want to write it. And I've been doing that ever since. So that was huge. But in terms of my actual spiritual journey, or my life journey, they've all played a role, at different times. Different times I've been really drawn to something earthy and shamanic or psychedelic, other times more transcendental. Hinduism's been huge, Taoism. I love the devotional aspects of things like Sufism. There's something, and I think when I was younger, there was a real sense, we're talking the 80s now really, and maybe through a bit to the 90s, there was a sense of, you need to settle. It's not a spiritual smorgasbord. You don't just, you won't go deep unless you commit to a path. Yeah. And I never could, and I felt bad about it. And now I feel so grateful, because I think what marks our time is that this is the time of mass eclecticism. Yeah. This is a time where all of that's available, and the job for people like me is to synthesize it. And I can say, look, it's all my tradition. I'm a human being. They were human beings. Every tradition is my tradition. Of course it is.
And I've heard from sort of hearing you talk and reading some of your books, there's also the sort of the importance of, really pulling out the grains of similarity from all these different ones, which are often the most powerful pieces of wisdom.
Yes, yes, I think so. I mean, that was part of the early work for me, was going, look, where is this, what's the human experience that these different human beings have had? Because I think it might be similar to the one I've had. And they've had it in their own different way, and then they've talked about it from the perspective of their own culture, literally in a different language, in a different time, in a different place. Yeah. And you can only think with the concepts you have. Yeah. But having said that, Will, I would also say now, as I've got older, I really appreciate the differences too. A bit like I do with human beings. A bit like, each person or each culture is seeing something the other ones might be missing. Yeah. Or has got stuck in some backwater that the other ones have avoided, both.
Yeah. Great. How did you get on with ayahuasca, out of interest?
I loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah. All psychedelics.
Yeah.
Psychedelics have been a continual part of my journey all the way through, less and less as I've got older.
Yeah.
Never a lot.
Yeah.
But
wise.
but I would say at least every few years, at least.
Right.
There's been it's a remarkable thing that it just opens up a different type of experience.
Yeah.
And I find it absolutely fascinating.
So what do you think you would have got from ayahuasca, or say a psychedelic experience, that you wouldn't necessarily have got from an ordinary spiritual tradition, awakening
They're
technique?
just entirely different. I say entirely different. What I loved about my psychedelic experiences is that usually they came with the big love experience, and they came with a lot of wisdom. So they had a spiritual aspect to it. It seems that not everyone has that. It seems that you can, I was seeing people taking LSD and smoking pot, drinking beer, and watching the colour of the TV turned up for the evening. And it's like, wow, really? What, no talking to God or anything? It's like that. So it wasn't like that for me. So it was that they were always spiritual experiences. So that they had in common. But the unique flavour of the psychedelic experience, I've never seen replicated really by anything else, because it just opens up a different level. It's just a different thing. It's not the same. And that the visionary nature of it is so extreme. And the speed of it, it's like you're catapulted somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you need to be robust. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. But if you are robust, I mean, psychically robust, and it's just, I've just wanted always to experience as much as I can. Yeah. So there's this chance to experience something extreme. And I when I was younger, at least, bring it on. Let's see what it is.
Yeah, I don't think I like to have regrets in life as such. I'm not sure I would say I regret, but I think if I was to regret at all, I could regret that most of my drug experiences in my 20s really was when I was really sort of massively into sort of ecstasy and various other things I took as well, like LSD. But it was much more in a recreational context.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I sort of burnt out on too much of it and too much drinking, and it all came to a head. I never really got to sort of have more of that, clearer sort of psychonaut experience, actually exploring and learning from the experiences rather than just sort of treating it as recreational and fun.
Yeah.
I regret that a bit.
Yeah, I can understand. And I do think it's what mindset you bring to it makes a huge difference. So I can see that.
But I would say though that probably the nearest I was thinking this as I was reading some of your material the last couple of days about the big love experience and that feeling of real oneness and love and connection. And I think the closest I've had to that I could immediately think of is probably just being in ecstasy.
Ecstasy is unbelievable for that.
Yeah.
It really does feel. I was so excited when I discovered. I was quite old when that came in. So I was going to raves with a lot of younger people and just like, wow, I can't believe this. The level of connection and love is, oh my God, this is going to do so much good. Yeah. It was really exciting. And it is a beautiful healing. It's also a truth thing as well. It also has this element, I think, that it brings out a certain truthfulness. So they all have different qualities. And it can only bring out what's in you, obviously.
Yes.
So, it'll have different effects on different people in different circumstances.
Yeah, that's true.
One must, with everything, even with other things, like with meditation, you'd think that would be just safe for everyone. It's not true.
Yeah. For
some people, it's all too transcendental. Each person needs to find the right thing on their path, I think.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, I never got to sort of properly do the ayahuasca thing. I sort of stayed away from it because I'd already done my time with exploring in that way. But so in terms of sort of the sense of the broader arc and the being on the road and having the hero's journey sort of moving forward on the journey. The on the road stage is typically kind of characterized by challenges. What kind of challenges did you sort of hit along the way on this sort of journey of awakening?
So many every time, and a kind of maybe this is moving more into the dark woody thing, but the
moving towards it,
it's kind of like it's when you're on the road, it's kind of like you're moving. For me, for that phase, it's like I'm there and here, and then the moving doesn't quite take you where you want to go, or you're faced with what needs to break down before something new can emerge. And certainly, there's been periods when I was younger where that was quite dramatic, and I'd feel like, oh, this is the dark night of the soul, and I'd feel lost, and because I'd come to rely on that feeling of connection so much, when it went, it was like devastating, and I think, and I still get that. I still think it's part, but now I know it's part of my creative arc. And now I know that it's only when it all breaks down. And often, I'll feel in that period very sluggish. I might just need to just do nothing and feel heavy. And
that's where an awareness of the hero's journey and having lived through the arcs consciously, when you hit those awful patches, rather than going, oh my God, it's over, you can kind of think, actually, this could be a chance for something really good to happen. Coming here, keep open to it and keep conscious of what's
something's
being asked of
dying
me
and something's being born at those times, and then suddenly that moment for me, the image always feels like a bouncing ball. It's like what I feel like when I enter those phases, I have to just let go and let it fall, and the quicker I let it fall and the deeper I let it fall, the sooner it bounces, and I can feel it bounce up. It's like there's a moment where I just go, oh, it's coming up, I've hit the bottom, and then there'll be some new thing. And then it's almost the opposite. I don't know who I heard say it. I don't think it was me. But at a certain point, quite a long time ago, there was this idea of pick up as much as you can while you're down there. And I've kept that. And so sometimes when I will come out of the phase, it can be like, oh, damn it, I didn't take advantage of that as much as I could have done. I didn't bring up as much from those depths as I could have done. I was so keen to get out of the uncomfortableness that I didn't let myself really benefit from the uncomfortableness.
Harvest in the dark.
Yeah, harvest in the dark. Beautiful phrase. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like on the wheel of the year, the Celt wheel of the year, isn't it? So the Halloween time, and you go into that period of sort of really harvesting the dark that you and moving forward to the new Beltane and spring and the coming blooming again. So
it's definitely part of the process. I mean, what fascinates me now, we'll talk about it sometime, maybe in this conversation, I don't know if we'll have time, but is like, what is that? Why is it like that? And that's a real fascination for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why this extraordinary pattern of existence that takes us on these journeys.
Yeah, well, I think,
It's the nature of existence.
Yeah, but why?
Yeah.
And so my latest work, which is really attempting to go, okay, you've written all these books on these spiritual traditions. What do we need spirituality to do now?
Yeah.
That's my call. So that call was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 15.
Let's pause for a sec and just finish this a little bit, and then we'll go into the that new curve of the new call. But I just pulled out a little quote from the Mystery Experience book. That I was just going through some of my notes from the past, and I got here: to make the journey of awakening, we need to be willing to enter those dark corners in life where we feel sad and lost, angry and bitter, trapped and alone. If we can't go there, we won't be free. So this is like, this is the dark wood of the hero's journey, when we have to go in and go into those dark corners and, as I say, harvest the dark, and the place of our sort of shadow and our demons and inner monsters that we can, really look at and explore, and rather than deny and try and sort of accept and move through. Or what's your experience of I'm not asking you to sort of lay your soul bare in this interview, but of sort of harvesting the shadow of you, or working with the shadow. And
yeah, so let me tell you this first, and then I'll try and find a specific example, which shouldn't be difficult.
Don't necessarily have to use an example, but just
I think they're important.
Yeah.
I think it's important. But what came to mind, it feels like synchronous, so I should share it.
Yeah.
Was that most mornings, showering is great, because very early in the morning I'm having a hot shower, and normally that's when I'm very creative and new insights come. So this morning's little thing that popped out, maybe in preparation for this conversation, was it was in response to the idea that we're all perfect and everything's we're all already great and all that.
Yeah.
Which is nice. But my feeling was, wow. And maybe this is about me, but my feeling was each of us carry the awful burden of being ourselves. Every one of us carries this awful burden of being ourselves. And no one else knows what that really is, because we get to see all of us.
Yeah.
And what we're carrying is our past.
Apart from our therapist, perhaps.
even our therapist, like maybe, but maybe not. We get to see that, and we are that, and we get to see the chaos. We get to see the one bit rise up and take over from another bit, and then the inner conflicts and the feeling of, I'm really feeling good, and now I'm not, why? And all of just inside us. But more than that, the thought was, we're each redeeming some part of the universe, which is what we are. We're each made of the past. Everything is made of the past. Everything's made of what it's been. And we're made of all the things that we've ever been and ever said and ever done. And that's what we are. And all of that is jostling around inside of us. And the most emergent part, the part that is coming, the flowering from that, is working constantly to redeem all of that, reaching right back into our animal nature, our instinctual nature, all of it. And and the whole universe is trying to redeem itself. And each one of us is trying to redeem that small part of the universe. So this journey we're on is part of that. It's part of that redemption. So what happens in the dark wood is sometimes it can be external stuff. My parents dying was a dark wood, but often it's internal.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, there's these conflicts in myself, and this, how do I redeem this in me? How do I find the good in this? How do I transform this? Yeah. And that's happened throughout. I mean, just that feeling of being mistaken, being lost, or being blind. An unwillingness to see,
bringing it into the light.
And then or like leaving my guru was like that, like being able to go, hang on a minute, just a little while ago I was completely devoted to this person, but now it looks like I've been manipulated and put in a cult. Wow, I didn't see that. Or just really recently of just coming, here's a fundamental idea that underlies 33 of my 35 books, and I think it was wrong. And then being able to have the courage to go to oneself first, to go, oh no, that was wrong. I need to change this. And then to come out to my public, the people who support my work and like what I do, and constantly going to them. Well, it's happening all the time, of going, it's moved on. I've moved on. And realizing that every time I do that, a whole load of people don't like it. And some people really do and come with me. And then new people come with me. But that takes a lot of courage. because it's not the way to build a career. You know, if I'd just stayed with the Jesus mysteries, I'd be far more successful now because I'd be that man. And that's what my publishers wanted to make me. It was only my insistence. And each time I've done that has been because of a new call.
Yeah.
And I'm very reactive to them. The call comes, I follow. And
so do you think a resistance is an important part of it? Like if it's something you feel strongly like, oh God, I shouldn't really do that you listen to that, the resistance, think, oh, okay, I need to be listening to that.
If I feel resistance, I don't do it.
You don't do it? Okay.
No, but
sometimes people think the resistance is where you need to go. You know, that's the thing that you're feeling.
No, I don't have that.
No.
But generally, if it's the call, I just know it's the call.
Yeah.
And I, there's a certain naivety with it. I came up with this line.
So you always follow the call, regardless of whether it necessarily makes sense in terms of your practical life.
I have to. I have to. And it's because I have a very strong sense of death. I've always had that. Yeah. Always lived with death, or worked with death, worked with dying people. Yeah. Surrounded myself by death. So every moment in my life, I need to know what's the thing I need to do before I die. Yeah. Because that's the important thing. And then I'll do it. Because I don't want to get to the end and go, I didn't do it.
Yeah, you also know from the people who are at the end of their lives that they're not going to be regretting the things that they did do.
Yeah, and of course, you know, there will still be regrets. I mean, even at the age of 61, I know it will get stronger. You know, I look back on my life and I think, I wish I was more awake. I wish I was more loving. I wish I was wiser than I was. Of course, because I was younger, and hopefully I've got a bit wiser. So I think if you don't reach the end of your life and feel a little bit disappointed in yourself, you probably haven't been giving yourself enough. You haven't moved enough. Yeah. So there's got to be that. Yeah. But the thing I was going to say, Will, because I think it's relevant to this, I think you might like it, was there came a moment on my journey with the call. Yeah. And I think what it shows, you know, you could look at that and say, oh, Tim, look, he hears the call, he just follows it. Yeah. And that's kind of nice and brave. But it's also naive. Yeah. There's something naive about me. Yeah. I'm, you know, and to express that naivety, I thought, I need to, you know, the famous line by Lao Tzu, which says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. It's kind of encouraging you to keep just give it a go. You know, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. I'll just give it a go. So I changed it.
I generally tend to do that too. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So I turned it around. I thought that my experience is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with an unrealistic expectation of how easy it's going to be to arrive. That's my thing. It's like, you know, and then I discover when I hit the road, oh, this is a long road. And then when I hit the wood, it's like, oh, it involves going through the wood. Oh, I remember now. It always involves this, damn it. And that's when I just think, you know, when you start off, it's just going to be, I can get this book written in a few weeks or months. Yeah, right. And then a year later, and you've kind of, you're there in despair because it's all fallen to bits around you and none of it makes sense anymore. And you're just doubting the whole idea.
Well, in my case, it's been several years later. But
whatever the thing is, you know, that's the arc, you know, and then you hit that place. Yeah. So now I'm trying, even at this late age in my life, I'm trying to remember when I hit the dark wood, that's what it is, that I need to sink into it, be patient, and something good will come from it. You know, usually my first reaction is, oh no, not this. And then I have to, I let go and it gets better.
Dive in and give it a go. Yeah. Okay. So I know we got this new call that you're on now, a new journey. So let's sort of not hang around too long in the original sort of bigger arc, but just to sort of bring that first one through a little bit to conclusion. I had a sense that when I came to your mystery experience retreat and you were bringing that book out and I wrote an article about it and we talked a bit about it, and that time you had the sense of like, this is the culmination of how many years it was at that point, nearly 30, I think, of writing books. And this was the thing that was bringing through something new, the big love, the wow experience in a way that was sort of accessible and easy to understand for people to experience big love. So I'd imagine that out of that dark wood time of being lost for a while, this came through. And in a sense, that was the treasure you brought back. That was a return that you returned with. Would that be fair to say or not?
Yeah, I definitely felt that. That was, you know, one of the turns of the wheel. Yeah. And almost immediately. Yeah. You know, I thought this was on my last book.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I really did, because it felt like, this is encapsulated something I've been exploring since that experience when I was a kid.
The work is done. I can stop.
Yeah. And then, you know, it wasn't very long before it was like, oh no, it hasn't even started.
Yeah.
So I can remember still the look on my
And the
wife's
phone- and the
face
phone
when I
rings
told
again.
her. It's like, oh yeah, oh, well done. Now can you do this, please? I'm like, what? And that's
I think I remember you saying, God, the thought of doing another book now, it's such a big process and can't face it. And then soon, sure enough, this time bumped into you a bit further down the line, you were like, yeah, I'm working on a new book.
Yeah, because it's not really the books.
Yeah.
It's the ideas.
Yeah.
So what happens, is what how the call will manifest is that suddenly I get a vision, or I don't mean that in some romanticized sense. I mean, I see life through a new lens, and I fall in love with it, and it feels really significant to me.
Yeah.
And therefore I think it might be really significant to others. Yeah. And I'm excited, and literally a love affair. I love it, and I need to follow it. And then when I follow it, I'm on the road then. Yeah. I started.
Yeah.
And then on the road, I start getting more and more and more. So that by the time I hit the crisis point, I've accumulated so much. I'm just utterly devoted to it.
Yeah.
So that when I go into oh no, this means going through this struggle, I've invested and I'm off. I'm in it.
So let's dive in, Tim, to the latest call that you're on, the latest piece of work that you're doing. How did that call come?
It came from the mystery experience, having done that, which was very much, and I was running these events all over the world of taking people to the experience I had when I was young and been exploring ever since, and particularly wanting them to feel that love and connection and the sense of oneness. And it was going unbelievably well because people had, ever since when I was small, people would spontaneously have these experiences around me, often for the first time. But I had no idea how to make them happen for me or anyone else.
Yeah.
And suddenly I started finding ways, not that I could make them happen, but I could create an environment where people would just pop and things would happen. And often they did. And then from that, and with the mystery experience, I started this process of trying to bring together opposites. And one of the opposites that fascinated me was science and spirituality.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been really interested in science when I was younger because it always seemed like it was never going to tell me the meaning of life.
Yeah.
It was going to tell me how things work. Yeah. So I had no real interest in it.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I became more and more interested. And I started noticing what was happening. I've always also been interested in society, politics, the way that we work together. And I started to notice that the materialism in its philosophical sense, this sense of, look, the world is this, what you see is what you get, and it has no meaning, and death is the end, and get used to it, was really growing, so that it was infecting everyone, even my friends. I could feel it coming into me, and the feeling was this is, if you're intellectually clear enough, if you're a real thinker, this is the truth really, and if you can't take that, you'll wander off into some wishful thinking. And my feeling was, I don't think that's right. I think we're cutting ourselves off from something really, really important. And I described the book as a soul crisis in our culture because literally it's the denial of the existence of this deep area. Well, the thing which is having this conversation right now, that you exist on this other level where you are a psyche, a soul. Yeah. And so I set out to rescue that.
Yeah.
And to try and bring it into harmony, a genuine harmony with modern science, what I now call a trans-scientific spirituality, which is a big ask because mostly when I see people trying to do it, which I admire, I respect people who are doing it, what they're really doing is trying to bring science into a spiritual arena. And science isn't going to do that because science is on a different level. Yeah. So I've tried to do the opposite. I've tried to go, no, let's accept science on its own terms and let's see whether we can understand everything as this evolutionary process which science has shown for us, including spirituality. Yeah. And so far, God, the more I've gone into it, it's been quite a few years now. It's been maybe 8, 9, 10 years that I've been on this. It just gets richer and richer and richer.
Okay, so you taken this journey from, in a sense, prior to the mystery experience book. Would the call have been? No,
the call was after the mystery experience book. So the mystery experience books was just about bringing it together in a general sort of sense. Yeah. And then suddenly it was like, that's not enough. Yeah. That's not good enough. And what my orientation...
Is it really already 9 years since the mystery experience?
Well, I think
without worrying too much about the exact
story
details.
Is quite a few years ago. It's
Soul's story, because I moved to Glastonbury nearly 5 years ago, and I think it came out about then.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah,
that's about right. So it was a few years before that. Yeah, it was a definite new phase.
Yeah.
And it was more philosophical.
Yeah.
Suddenly it was like, oh no, because it was all about love and connection and experience primarily for me.
Yeah.
And then it was like, no, you need now to go back to your philosophical side.
Yeah.
And be willing to make the struggle to explore ideas in a clear, articulate way.
Okay. So the call was to go off and find this new synthesis of philosophizing around science and emergent psyche and soul.
Yeah, and then what came out was so exciting because of its clarity. It absolutely transformed my understanding, and it's still doing it. And here's one of the things which feels like relevant. So the basic idea I'm suggesting is that everything is evolving. Everything.
Yeah.
Which includes the nature of the psyche. And the psyche, it seems to me, is where we experience story, narrative.
Yeah.
So one of the things which it's saying is, look, we've had 14 billion years of evolution through which hydrogen has turned into the universe, has turned into life, has turned into psyche, has turned into story.
Yeah.
Now, what you're exploring with this series of podcasts is this narrative structure.
Yeah.
So this narrative structure is one of the structures that evolve out of this evolutionary process.
From the gases.
Yeah. And so we now have this narrative structure, which is why we can and I'm not saying we make stories about life.
Yeah.
I'm saying existence has become a story. It's actually become a story, which is why when you and I meet, the first thing that we do to each other is go, how's your story?
Yeah.
What's happening in your story? Because it's now a story.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So not surprisingly, this structure, which people like, this cycle of finding, losing, transformation becomes a way of understanding what existence is. It is that. And in a way, the evolutionary process has always been doing that. It throws up new possibilities. It tries it out. It hits a brick wall. If it doesn't survive, it goes. If it does survive, it takes off. And a whole new thing opens up. A new species opens up. It's been doing this same pattern, which we're now doing as a story. It's been always doing this because it's the creative pattern. It's elemental. And it becomes more and more sophisticated, and it breaks out into life so that life itself becomes story-like. Not just, it's also physics and biology and all the rest of it, but it's also story. So, for instance, one of the stories I told you earlier on was coming back from India and going, I want to hear an occultist. I want to meet an occultist. Meditating. I was having a huge experience. And the next day, literally first thing, ding, 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 I've just met a magician. Yeah. By that afternoon, I've traveled to Cardiff and I'm sitting in front of him. Yeah. Those synchronicities.
The power of intention.
Yeah. Why though?
Yeah.
Because life is now a story. Not just, but it is also a story. So that what we can understand is those spiritual experiences are what have arisen from physics and biology. And they're all part of one thing.
Yeah. I wonder if it's useful at this point just to, because we haven't really gone into the kind of the crux of your understanding from the mystery experience that we're now building on, and the idea you have of around the deep awake state and the deep self, and your understanding that you explored in the mystery experience of paralogical thinking, whereby life can be one thing and another, the two paradoxes. So one can be deep awake, i.e. in touch with, connected to one's field of being, the deep self, and the field of being that exists for everybody, that primal source, and also be an individual living one's life and living one's story. So that those two poles were what you're exploring in the mystery experience, and how we can be both at the same time, and by being aware of both, we can have this really deep awake state of communion with love. You can probably explain this better than I'm doing.
I thought you did it beautifully, actually. Well,
okay. So from there, in this new journey, this new call, I know there's this expansion into this idea of a unividual that sort of somehow combines those two. Do you want to take us forward from there?
Yeah, well, the unividual is a name I've given to that idea. So one of the big journeys for me was in the 90s, going to India, getting involved in the non-dual Advaitic tradition, meeting a teacher out there, him blowing my mind.
I was going to say to you, presumably people who are students of Advaita are going to be onto this stuff pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, this was, this time no one had heard of Advaita much.
Yeah.
It was tiny backwater.
Yeah.
Now it's huge. The non-dual thing was very, 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 very small. Big influence played into my idea that Tim is the problem. And I could certainly look at Tim and go, yeah, he's a problem. That was easy to do.
Yeah.
I need to get rid of Tim. It's all one, and then I'll experience oneness. So that was one journey, and then another one started up from that, which you may relate to, is I had a daughter.
Yeah.
And suddenly no one was going to tell me the individual didn't matter. No one's going to tell me I shouldn't be attached. I was completely attached. I was very happy about that.
Yes.
I realized that love entailed immense suffering.
Yeah.
Because if anything happened to this little girl, I would suffer, and I wanted to.
Yeah.
So all of that just went out the window. So then I'm left with, okay, so what was valid in it, and how does it coincide with these much more human experiences, which really seem obviously important? I kind of always known it. I said Bernard throughout had been pointing to this to me, and I suddenly saw the reality that he was trying to show me. And then it became, okay, so the individual and the oneness sit together.
Yeah.
In fact, not only do they sit together, we wake up to the oneness through the individual. So that was the beginning of a phase, which is still going on, of I am a spokesman for our individuality, our humanity,
Yes.
our flawedness, our ordinariness, through which we can experience this deep awake state where we're one with all.
Yeah.
Not by getting rid of it, but as well. And that's the paralogical idea. Not either or, which I think is a monological. It's this or this, which is useful a lot of the time. But for deeper things, we need a paralogical, both this and this. So are we all one? Yes. Are you also an individual? Yes. And they sit together. And then this latest phase has been about why and how can that be true? And I think I can now explain pretty damn clearly why and how that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I like your idea, actually, that, you write about that and speak about that, rather than spirituality being all about this fall from oneness, and we've got to get back to this thing that we've lost. Actually, being an individual is important and good. We can't deny our individuality or humanity. And from that place, we can actually wake up. I think that's a good standing point.
Yeah. And so the big shift, I mean, the evolutionary thing has actually been around for about 20 years for me, really, but it's just become stronger and stronger and stronger. And I've started to realize what it means. And one of the things it means is what you just said. It's like, are we, the mythos that you get from spirituality, which really arose about the Axel Age, maybe 2,500 years ago, maybe, you find it in most cultures, is the idea that we've fallen from somewhere and we need to get back. So you constantly hear people talking about remembering the true self, remembering what you've lost. It's kind of healing back into what your perfection. Yeah. So, but my question is, are we remembering, or are we discovering for the first time? Because what I love about the evolutionary process is it's much more optimistic. That's a very negative view. It was all right and then it all went wrong. The view which coincides much more with my experience of life is, no, we are collectively waking up for the first time. We're moving towards something which is new. Just as there once was no life, there was now life. Just as there was no consciousness, then there was consciousness. Just as there was no psyche, and then there's psyche. And then certain people are waking up to this oneness and becoming individuals who know unity, Unividuals. And I think that's what's happening to us now. And it's not because we've fallen from something that we need to remember. It's because the whole of existence is always expanding. It's always getting richer. It's always more emergent. New things are coming into. It's creative.
Actually, I heard you on one of your recent talks online that I was listening to, talking about how you think that people, I guess, from a perspective of being a unividual, are far more compassionate around the world than they've ever been before in humanity's history. That people really care about what's happening on the other side of the world. If people are having problems or having, natural disasters, or animals are being extinct, or like polar bears, and they're worried about that. Why do you think it is that this compassion level has grown so much over history?
I think we're evolving.
Yeah.
So when I came in when I was young, like many young people, I thought our society was completely messed up and lost and consumerist and all the rest of it. And a lot of those things are true. But I had no idea about history. Now I'm older and I know a lot about history. I know how far we've come, how good this is in comparing. That history is not a place you'd want to live.
No.
This is, we have come so far, and people just don't get it. how far we've come, which is why, you need to be careful, because this is really valuable, what we've achieved, and we need to be thankful for all those that came before us, who's given us this.
Yes.
I mean, just the fact that you and I are Englishmen who've never been to war, Will.
Yeah.
How many generations can say that? None, probably.
Yeah.
That's immense. This is huge, huge transformation. So, and then you can look at society and go, for all of its problems, and God knows there's plenty, it could be a lot better. Actually, there's been a massive growth, as you said, in compassion for the natural world, for other human beings. We have compassion built into our laws. Most of history, racism is a good thing. Now it's illegal. Has it got rid of racism? No, of course not. But has it diminished it? Massively.
Yeah.
And we need to see that, because underneath it, what's happening is that there is an increasing number of people, still small, I suspect, who not only sensing that oneness of humanity or oneness of the natural world, but are actually this mystical oneness with the universe, where you go, oh, I am the universe. What? And for me, it now feels like, what else could I be? What else could I be? I mean, I've come from the universe. It's like an apple going, I am the apple tree. It's like, I've come from it. I am the universe. Yeah. What does that actually mean? And now we know literally that our body, for instance, the chemicals are formed in ancient stars. We literally come from them. What does that mean? How will that change how we perceive life?
And you, Tim, and I'm Will, in relation to the universe.
Yeah.
So we're individual selves, and we're also the deep self and the connection to the universe.
So right now, literally, I want to say this in a literal way. This is not just poetic, although it is quite poetic. The universe is having a conversation with itself, having arisen as Tim and Will, with their unique characteristics and their little insights and their foibles and all the different things which each individual has. And by being an individual, the universe has a relationship with itself. Yeah. Because reality it is all one, but it's not just all one. That's the big change from the non-dual thing that I was into 20 years ago. Yeah. It's not just all one. It's the oneness in relationship with itself. Yeah. So it's also, it is relationship. Everything is relationship. But how wonderful when you see, it's lovely to just meet you as Tim and Will, but to meet you as Tim and Will and behind it, 14 billion years of the universe. Yeah. It's like, wow, this is quite something that's happening right now. Yeah. And here we are as the universe trying to figure out who we are. I'm the universe. So am I any good? Where did I come from? Am I going somewhere? Do I have a purpose? What's this psyche bit that I'm experiencing? What's the dream aspect? There seems to be a story here. It's got patterns. Why is that? Some of it's really hard. Why is there so much suffering? All of these things are the universe working out its own nature. Yeah. And we are it doing that.
Yes. I love actually what you said about how in evolution now, the thing that's the most emergent is the area of the psyche, the soul, the imaginal. That's the biggest part of the evolution that's coming up beyond our physical form and the biology side. And does that mean sort of that we're in the years to come likely to be increasingly sort of more aware of, say, the psychic levels of reality, more
we already are.
More connected to an understanding of our dreams, more influenced by our dreams. That whole side of life is likely to explode, is it? I think it's going to
massively explode. Yeah. It already is. Yeah. I mean, one of the big changes that's happened is that once a culture is affluent enough that everyone's not frightened of starving, people can worry about their mental health. To put it bluntly, it's like we are now in the luxury where we can start where most of us have got too much to eat. In our culture. So now we don't have to worry about that. Well, that's been most of history. Yeah. So now we can go, but I'm still suffering. Oh, but it's suffering on a different level now. Now I'm suffering in the psyche. So that becomes our point of orientation, quite rightly. This is interesting. And the creativity. I mean, we're sitting here in a recording studio. Everything I can see apart from your body has gone through the human imagination. Everything. There's nothing I can see apart from your body under your clothes. Yeah. Which has not been through the human imagination. We live in the human imagination now. These worlds are not separate. They're intermingled. Yeah. And that will increase. Yeah. And is. I mean, look at the speed. I mean, biological evolution takes a long time, but the evolution of the psyche is happening exponentially.
Yeah. What do you think, incidentally, of talking of sort of whole new explosions of reality, or of the psyche of sorts, but of this whole new idea of Elon Musk's of of having the microchip that you put in your brain, so that effectively
becoming cyborgs.
The sort of what the mobile phone actually becomes your brain, and so you're in touch with all the knowledge, all the internet in your head without doing anything.
It makes me wish I was younger.
Really?
Because I probably won't be alive to see it.
Do you not think that's a bit scary?
Of course it's scary. Could go horribly wrong. But that's the nature of the call and the journey, Will. And this is humanity's call to go to another level. There's another level. I mean, look at the internet. It's like there was no internet for most of my life.
Yeah.
Unthinkable.
I know. Yeah.
And what a wonderful. Is there problems with it? Yeah, of course. Is there things we didn't foresee? Of course there is, because that's the dark wood in the creative process. Oh, you thought it was going to be all great, did you? Now have a look. What about this? Here's the dark side. Now you've got to wrestle with that. And we're in that right now. So we've been through with that level of technology. Yeah. We've been through yes, it's all going to be great. And then, oh no. And now we need to work it out. We'll come out the other side. There'll be something waiting for us. And the same with all of this. We need to be vigilant, but exciting, don't you think?
Yeah, it's certainly got all sorts of scope for, whole new exciting dimensions. But it's also a little bit scary. Like, when I heard Elon Musk talking about how, he said, like, in 10 years, you wouldn't even need to talk. You could just sort of, I guess, commune telepathically without actually needing to talk. And that feels a bit weird, that we could suddenly not be talking anymore.
Well, it sounds fantastic.
You think so?
Well, presumably you can still talk if you want to. But if we can communicate in other ways, I mean, it's like, I never had a mobile phone for years and years and years and years because I wasn't very mobile, so I thought, I don't need one. And then finally I bought one. I think from the moment I bought it hasn't left my side. I mean, it's great. I've got the wisdom of the world within 3 taps. Yeah. I want a quote that I've forgotten. There it is. Yeah. I want to listen to a piece of music that I once heard. There it is. I want to find out who somebody you've just mentioned is. There it is. I mean, just incredible. I'm so grateful. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, on the positive, it's really, really wonderful. But then I can't also help thinking, like, well, what about sort of, if people who are in control of that microchip and they can influence.
Of course. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen.
You're controlled in some way.
Of course.
But you can't necessarily control that, can you?
No, there's always been a negative thing. But there's I don't listen to many podcasts, but one I enjoyed is called the Pessimist Podcast, and which I pick up every now and again, which is basically going through history with every new innovation in which everyone has said, oh, it's the end of the world, whether it's writing or electricity or TV or radio or recorded music or even the umbrella. Yeah. There's been a whole load of people who've just gone, it's the end of the world. And we always do that. Yeah. And of course, there are some things which are bad and lead to problems. It's not all good. It's not. And things can go horribly wrong, and they really could. And we should not be naive. And as I said already, if I have a flaw, it's a tendency towards being naive. So, well, I definitely have lots of flaws, and that's one of them. But despite that, I can't help look at this. For me, it's like this is the same evolutionary process that got us from hydrogen to you and me having this conversation. Yeah. We should at least give it the benefit of the doubt. And if the human imagination is leading to something new and amazing, this is where it's going to go. It's not going to stay where we are. Yeah. It's going to move.
Yeah. And talking of where we're going, I loved your idea, listening to your recent online talk. I forget the name of the conference. Was it a new beginning world conference or something? Yeah. And you shared this new idea tied to the idea of the sort of evolution of Unividualism. Yeah. That actually, rather than the idea that it all started with a sort of benevolent God who, he was there up in the sky, who was there at the beginning, we're actually moving towards that God as individuals, creating this movement towards something like towards being in a communion of love. Yeah. And that is the God that we're moving towards.
Yeah, it's a big idea for me, Will.
Tell me about that. That's really fascinating.
Well, the great, because I spend a lot of time doubting my own ideas. A lot of time. That's part of the dark wood. Because sometimes it goes very deep and it's very disturbing when you doubt your own ideas. Can be, but very good. Yeah, I really recommend it. And so there's problems like I experienced. Well, from the very first thing when I was 12, I said, look, my context was Christian, so I saw it as God. And all through my life, I felt this love affair with something greater than myself, which is totally benign. This hugely benign, loving presence was really rooting for me and everyone else, and yet intellectually, it makes no sense to me. I understand why the Western world has rejected it, or the intellectual world, because the idea, it doesn't, why 5 extinctions, mass extinctions? Why 14 billion years to get here? Why, if you wanted souls, just create souls? Why dinosaurs? So, why all the suffering? Why the craziness? If you're running the show, you're not running it very well. All of those classic doubts about God. But my resolution, which has really excited me, comes from this simple idea of what I'm experiencing right now is every new moment evolves from the previous moment and contains it in some way, because it's implicit, in this moment of having this conversation, is everything we've already said. Us meeting up and having breakfast, you inviting me, us getting to first know each other, us learning English, us getting born, the evolution of the human species, the whole damn thing is implicit in this moment. Yeah. So it seems to have got ever more emergent and richer. So it started with the simplest of things, like hydrogen and helium, very simple things, and it's become richer and richer. Well, what's the richest thing I can imagine? Well, the universe conscious of itself, perhaps. God, something utterly benign. So what if, rather than God the creator, we turn it around and we see that it's a difficult word, but if you can follow me, it's to say this is God evolving. Yeah. And just as Tim has evolved from an egg and a sperm, basically chemicals, and then turned into a person and a psyche, and now is having this conversation, that the whole universe is on that arc. Yeah. It is evolving into something transcendent, and it's evolving through us. So that God is not the source; it's the destination.
Yeah, he's
it's flowering,
evolving,
it's flowering
product.
Yeah. The universe is flowering into God. Yeah. It's quite a poetic way of putting it.
So, Tim, where are you? Would you say on this? If we're looking at it as a hero's journey arc, where are you on this new arc now?
Oh, what a great question! So you
followed the call.
I've had a new level of the call. To be honest with you, again, probably my naivety. When I did Soul Story, I told my wife, I said, okay, that's it now. Yeah. I can rest because I really feel I've done the thing which that young boy wanted me to do. And I think I now can have a rest. 2 weeks it took. I was at the Fringe at Edinburgh, and I just stopped literally in my tracks, and I went, oh God, no. And I just knew that there was a whole nother level of the journey. And because I'm naive, I thought, I don't think this will take me so long. I think this is just an extension. I think I'll do this. I think I have to do this, because that's how it always feels like.
The groundwork's done. It'll just need to polish it up.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And it feels like I have to do it. I owe it to the universe to do it in some way.
This far.
It wants me to do it. I've been given a beautiful idea. I have to, but it won't take much. And here I am quite a few years after that now, 5 years after that, working on a whole new level of it, and it's huge. And I'm working on it in a whole new form as well. I don't think it's going to be a book, but it will be it's much bigger than the.
Oh, it won't be a book.
I think it's going to be communicated in a different way, probably using audio.
Right.
But it's much more detailed, and it's really pushed me. So I would say I'm on the road and occasionally in the dark wood, because through that process, what happens is one day I'll wake up and it can feel like, this is really working. My God, I'm so clear. And then there comes a day I wake up and it's not. And I hit some problem. I unpick something, and having unpicked it, nothing holds together anymore. And at that point, you can feel like, I've completely lost. Or you hold with it, and then so far, I come out the other end with some new treasure. So I'm in that cycle at the moment.
Yeah.
Looking forward to bringing it home. If I'm honest, because it feels like I've still got quite a long journey ahead. And as I get older, it is really that sense I said, I ask myself, what do I have to do before I die? And in terms of my work, that's it. And I also have that feeling once again that if I could get this done, I think I'd be done then. And I can go and sit on a beach.
I suspect you'll be starting new calls, Tim, for the next 30 years.
Well, I did have this little thought where I thought, maybe I just need to change the way I think about this, because often I'll get, I don't know if this sounds crazy to you or not, but I will feel an imperative, because I think, what happens if I die before I complete it? It's like that could happen to me. It's important I complete it. And of course, the more I put into it, the more important it becomes. So I have that. And I thought the way to counteract that is I thought, well, maybe, I hope I love life. So I hope I live as long as I possibly can, as long as I'm healthy. But I thought, well, maybe I should think about it, that when I die, my close friends will go, whatever age it is, they'll go, oh, it's such a shame because he was just beginning to do his best work. Because that would be great, wouldn't it? If I carried on doing my best work continually through the whole thing, and that each step was my best work.
Well, you've written, 30-odd books so far in the first 60 years or so. Maybe, even though you think you're at the end, you might find that you're sort of going to go on to 110 and write another sort of 40. And actually, you wrote all at the beginning all the way along.
Yeah, I do hope not. I like I said, I want to communicate in different ways. But the ideas themselves are what, the books are not really the thing. It's the ideas.
So, in the mystery experience, you quote Joseph Campbell, the founder of the hero's journey, as saying, "What we are really living for is the experience of life, both the pain and the pleasure." And that obviously ties in quite nicely with the title of this podcast, Follow Your Blisters. And I just wonder what you thought about that proposal for life, if you like, Follow Your Blisters, or whether you would adapt that in some way, or whether you think it's a fitting.
I think it's beautiful. When I came across that, what Joseph saying that made me smile so much, because I could hear myself as a young man with following my bliss was very much the message. And then as an old man going, no, it's follow your blisters.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really love in mystery experience is right at the end, I just wanted to show what it was like for me, just really honestly. And there's a constant struggle to do that. It's just to go, look, I just want to be me. I don't want to be Tim Freke author. I don't want to be Tim Freke spiritual teacher, philosopher. I am all those things, but I'm just me. I'm this guy on this crazy journey trying to make the best I can of it. So I wrote a whole chapter of just describing one line, opposites. I had this experience. It was amazing. I had this experience. It was devastating. I had this experience. It was amazing. I had this experience. It was devastating. Often they were two sides of similar things.
Yeah.
And it was the whole chapter. And I thought afterwards that I felt good to feel like, if I want to encourage us to be vulnerable and real with each other. So I have to try and be vulnerable and real myself as best I can.
Yeah.
And that is, so the blisters, the bliss and the blisters, a paralogical pair.
Yeah.
They go together.
Absolutely, yeah.
They go together.
Yeah.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
Bliss and blisters.
Bliss and blisters, exactly. Yeah. Maybe that's been the title of the podcast.
I like that, don't you? Bliss and blisters is good.
Yeah, it is good.
Not as funny as Follow Your Blisters. That's funny.
Yeah. So, I'm just finding myself wondering, if we are on this evolutionary journey collectively, becoming unividuals, if we're not already, towards a sort of unividualism and a God that is being evolved out of this journey towards love and in love as we go along. Where are we on that journey now? Like in Soul Story, you talk about us being in a soul crisis. Does that mean that we're in the dark wood now in this particular moment? Or
I think the problem we've got at the moment,
this COVID times.
Yeah, I mean, COVID is obviously a whole another chapter. We don't know. I still don't think we know what it is yet, and what it'll hard until we've got further into it, or even we look back on it to know what it is. I think there's immense fear. I think things are better than they've ever been, and everyone thinks they're worse than they've ever been.
Yeah,
and that's a very funny place. Although I think kind of it's always like that, and people forget how bad it was very quickly.
Yeah.
I hear about social division. We're all in conflict now, and I think, well, Jesus, I remember the conflicts went on in the 70s in this country.
We're not hacking each other to death.
It wasn't very long ago. In the 60s, I was a kid. The American army went in and shot students with guns. I mean, it's like that's unthinkable at the moment. So things are better than we think. So is it the dark woods? Yeah, because we still experience it like that. So the soul crisis thing is something very specific for me. It's not like, we're in a soul crisis, everything's going wrong. It's more, we're in the intellectual mainstream. The idea of scientism, if you like, not science, but a philosophical interpretation of science as reductionist and materialist, or at least objectivist. The objective world is what's real, and anything to do with spirituality is just woo-woo nonsense and wishful thinking. That has become so strong, I think temporarily, that it's leaving us in a meaningful universe. You're here long enough to go, what the hell, and you're dead. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a very bleak world. Also, nearly everyone I know doesn't experience it like that. Which means if you're having experiences of meaning and spiritual experiences, of which there's a huge array, you can't go to science to understand it. So where do you go? Well, most of the places you can go is pre-scientific spirituality, which is often pre-rational. It's not very evolved. It is superstitious and not very well thought through. So we're seeing a growth of that in response. Whereas what we need is the opposite of that. We need not a pre-scientific spirituality. We need a trans-scientific spirituality. So that's why we're in the soul crisis. And I think a new paradigm's coming. I don't know whether I'll see it really take off, but I'm quietly confident it will. And that paradigm will be as big a shift as the Industrial Revolution or the scientific paradigm coming in.
Well, it's kind of the tipping point, isn't it? It feels like we're getting closer and closer to that tipping point.
Yes.
Where everything can suddenly
the problem is
mushroom from there.
That at the moment, the scientific, the narrow scientism philosophy is really not working. And the alternative we haven't got the alternative yet. So the alternative seems to be going back to something.
Yeah.
So, we need to get back to shamanism or get back to nature it's all about going back. And that is not going to work. Yeah. We need to take the value of those things. We can now look back and find what was value in these older traditions, but we need to go forward with them and that means something which can transcend and embrace what science has shown us on its own terms. Yeah. And that is there's not much of that in the intellectual mainstream. Yeah. Now, in the general population, it's completely different. But the intellectual mainstream has a big effect. Yeah. So I'm trying to play my little role in articulating something which somebody further down the line might be able to take into the mainstream and provide a new paradigm.
So it sounds like potentially we're in the dark wood of sorts, and that maybe there's this sort of emergent treasure that could be closer than we think, or it could be a long way still, but it's emerging.
Yeah, I think probably like most dark woods, we think it's darker than it actually is. Yeah. And that's often true, isn't it? Yeah. You're in the dark woods, it feels like the end of the world. Everyone outside of you is feeling like it's not really the end of the world.
The darker it is, the closer the light is.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
the sinner is like in the same way that the sinner is the greater the sinner, the nearer they are to becoming a saint. I think the idea is.
That sounds like someone who's doing a lot of sin in his life.
Obviously talking from experience, so Tim, you've talked a little bit about, you mentioned the other day that you have this online community.
Yes.
And that's for Unividuals, right?
Yes, it's the International Community of Unividuals, which comes down to the ICU, which is I quite liked because a lot of what I do is with connection and with gazing and the idea of seeing each other.
Yeah, I've done the gazing. That's great.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it fantastic? Yeah. That's the practical side now, which is still going on. I'm still doing that. Obviously now with the pandemic, those aren't happening right now. So, but I have built up this lovely little community of people all over the world. I just love it that we get together. I was doing a group in Japan just yesterday.
Oh yeah.
And
so it's a group in Japan online.
Yeah.
How do you organise that? So it's just Japan.
That's just Japan because of the language, because we need to translate it.
Oh, right,
well, it's not just Japan. We had someone from Portugal, someone from
are you big
Australia.
In Japan? Are you big in Japan?
I wouldn't say so. It'd be fun. but I have a small presence.
Yeah.
But mainly, it's literally all over the world. We get together once a week online, and we do stuff to support our individuality, the blossoming of an individual into a unividual. So that's about community, but it's also about philosophy, and then it's also about practice, things we can do together, which are really beautiful. And, and we can do it together.
Wow, that sounds great. So how do people access that community?
Well, the best place is to go to my website because there's a whole page about it there.
TimFreke.com?
Yeah, TimFreke, Freke.com.
Yeah.
And there's loads of videos as well. You can find out everything I'm doing. And the thing about the community, though, this is not a subscription service, which a lot of people are doing and good for them, but I can't do that. This is a community. This is
a free resource.
It's not a free resource. It's a community which, if you can try out, and if you want to be part of, you can contribute towards, and then what you contribute is obviously up to you because it's a community. Yeah. But what I want is people who get it, because unividuality is about service. You're there not because, it's good for me. It is good for you, but you're there because you're contributing to the collective. You're actually an individual who understands that love impels action towards service. So that's what I want. I want people who can see that. And of course, you don't know that straight away. I might be full of baloney and all the rest of it. So you need to check me out.
Yeah.
Keep your bullshit detector on full. See whether actually I'm just, trouble. And if you think, no, I'll give it a risk, then you can come on in and we can connect together personally.
Sounds like a good place to explore.
It is.
And incidentally, I love the title, but there's only other one name it could be for your podcast, The Freke Show. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Yeah.
And
nice.
I've listened to a few of those, and they're great. So yeah, I recommend people tuning into Tim's podcast, The Freke Show, which can also be accessed from the website or from where else? Tim?
All the normal places you get your
Spotify,
podcasts, iTunes, all that places.
Yeah.
And I do a lot on YouTube. YouTube's a great place to connect with me.
Okay, great. And Tim, two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, what advice would you have for somebody or anyone listening who gets a call to adventure? What would you recommend they do? How should they respond to that call? Naively, yes.
Yeah, I mean, no, actually, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that because I see also people... I also see the opposite, Will. And it's good for me to say this because it can sound like I would say, yes, just do it. And you hear the call and it's all great. But I also see people who go, a lot of people who've gone, I've got a call. I'm going to put on this massive festival and I've invested all of my savings and I've sold my house. I know these people.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, don't do this. And then it's disaster.
Yeah.
And it's not, you came out of the disaster and you found that it's just disaster.
Yeah.
Now, they will have found something. They'll have found, why am I such an idiot? I mustn't do that again. So there will be treasure.
Yes.
But you don't want to find treasure that way. So I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is we are complex, multifaceted individuals. So we have a deep intuition, which is mysterious. Everyone has it. It's the most emergent part of you, which is why it's so mysterious. Hasn't fully arrived yet. It's the cutting edge of your evolution, and it will send you messages. But also, those messages are not necessarily, it's just creative. And then you need to test it out. And you also have a rational part. You have a part that can consider things, and you need to test it out with that. And then you need to see that you need to balance that with the realities of your life. So there's a way in which you can follow the call, take it seriously, but also be skeptical, careful, honor your commitments, know that you're and that's maturity.
Yes.
It's when you're young, it's like, and when I was doing it, it's like, okay, you got nothing to lose. Yeah, what the hell? Well, that was a disaster. Now, moving on. But as you get older, you become more mature, and then you have to think all those things. So it's a balance. I think
that's the bummer about getting older, isn't it? You've got too much to lose sometimes.
and there's important things. One of the great things is you gain responsibilities.
Yeah.
And those are usually about other people. And so my feeling then is, and I say this to myself and I would say it to anyone, is that's beautiful. The beautiful that you that you are so connected in now to others that there's times when you might put others first, but still don't dismiss the call, because there might be a way that I would say, because life is a story, there will be a way in which that deep call will integrate into the way your life already is.
Well, hopefully the call should always be in some way about bringing something back for others. So I think it shouldn't be a selfish call.
I think it often is.
Yeah.
Maybe in the deeper sense it always is.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of I want to be able to just nail it here. The naivety of which I've learnt about myself is just thinking that whatever you think is your intuition is carrying a truth. It's not. Everything's evolving. There is no perfect voice. It can be overenthusiastic. It can be, but it's something. It's the creative part of you. So when the call comes in and says, "Do this," respond with the rest of you going, "What was it? Is that right? Or is it almost right? Can I refine that?" And then you enter into a dialogue with your intuition in which it will change. It's not finished. Everything is evolving. So that very voice of the call will evolve too.
Yeah.
But through the dialogue, which involves all of you, that's where the real riches are found.
Yeah. That sounds wise advice. Yeah. Great. And on another sort of note or stage, what advice would you have for somebody who's stuck in the dark wood? What advice would you have to them about how to respond to that place?
I think it was Winston Churchill originally said it. I don't know. I think it was him who said, when you're walking through the valley of death, the secret is to keep walking. And I think that's true with the whole Darkwood experience. It's like, just engage with it. Yeah. Go through the process, and you will find yourself coming out of it. Yeah. And get the help you need to support you in it as well, because you can feel very alone in that stage, but you're not alone.
Yeah, you've got to have the support.
Very rarely are we alone. And we're never alone from the universe. There's a big loving force in the universe, whatever name you give it, and you're never alone from that.
Yeah. And also we mustn't forget, of course, that we need to harvest in the dark as well, not lose the opportunity to
dive in. Yeah. Don't regret it later. So make the most of it while you're there.
Yeah.
While you're down there, pick something up.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I think we should try and end on a sort of positive, helpful note. So let's say, Tim, what advice would you have for, say, even one thing people could do today or this week that would be a positive step forward on their journey to contributing to the world in a positive way?
What do you have to do before you die?
So just do that thing, whatever it is that's calling you to do before you die.
Just ask yourself.
Yeah.
Let the knowledge that this will end, this particular adventure. I don't think everything ends. I don't think death is the end. Yeah. But Tim will end and will end in terms of their adventure in the world as this body doing this stuff. Yeah. So it's precious. Where's the story want to go? You are your story. You don't have a story. You are the story. And you get to shape the story. How do you want to shape it? You're conscious. You can shape the story you're in far more than you possibly realize. All of us can. So where does it want to go? Where do you want to go? What really matters? And if you can't go straight there, how can you build a bridge that will get you there eventually?
Fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for your time today and for having this wonderful conversation. It's been fabulous. Thank you.
It's been wonderful to connect with you, Will. I knew it would be.
Thank you for listening to Follow Your Blisters. If you've enjoyed this episode, please stay tuned for more lively and inspiring conversations released bi-weekly on Wednesdays on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify and other channels. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, where any reviews would be hugely appreciated. You can also find out more about this podcast on consciousfrontiers.com, where you can sign up to receive news and updates. Big thanks go to Ike Morland for editing and recording this podcast, to Michael Tyak for the music, and to GFM Radio here in Glastonbury for lending me their studio. Finally, if you have friends who you think would enjoy or benefit from this podcast, please do spread the word. Thanks a million.